Give it up, baby.
So this is about 20 to 25 minutes. It won't feel that long. And we'll talk at the end on whatever you want to talk about, whether it's vocal variety, eye contact, stage usage, what you liked, what you didn't like. I have very thick skin, so feel free to hit me square between the eyes. But I hope you enjoy. Can you grab hold of your own transformation? What's keeping you from breaking out of your own comfort zone? What's your catalyst for change? Do you have the fortitude to do something to make a difference in your life and the lives of others? Do you even know the signs that can spur you to be better, stronger, braver? Your ability to cross over the threshold from change thinking to change actions may not be as far out of your reach as you think. Personal and professional success are there for the taking. We all have the ability to change who we are. We need to be flexible to change. Just look at the healthcare industry with constant reform and new medical practices. For example, hands-only CPR is now encouraged. People are being taught to push hard and fast to the beat of the song Staying Alive because it's supposed to have 100 beats per minute. In reality, it has 103. There is a song with 100 beats, but the medical experts are not sure they want it running through your head while you're doing it. And another one's gone, and another one's gone, and another one bites the dust. Before we get too deep into the content, I want to share with you that I'm an addict. I'm addicted to Toastmasters. It has changed my life and career. I've had issues with communicating and singing. Although it's done nothing for my musical prowess, it's done wonders for my ability to stop taking 20 minutes to tell a 30-second anecdote. Let me show you how far I've come with the story. My wife and very naive 14-year-old daughter were driving down the road when my daughter asked what that abandoned building was. My very reluctant wife answered, "That's a topless bar." Now, before you think I'm about to get inappropriate, my daughter asked, "What they do when it rains?" Today, as I look back on the many milestones I've passed in my life, some I noticed, some I didn't. As we go through today, I want you to look back on the potential lessons learned in your life and ask yourself, did you do anything with them? It's okay if you didn't, because it's not too late. Let's take a moment to think about the names of 3 people, animals, events, anything that can or have inspired you. Each may have a different reason for influence, whether it's admiring someone's courage, lessons taught, or learning from your own mistakes. There's a constant in all of this to make it happen, and that's you. Up until a few years ago, I was inconsistent with my professional performance, often cynical, definitely defensive. I've been demoted twice in my career and told I would never reach senior management because they never saw me in the role. Yet I can stand in front of you today and tell you I've never been happier or more satisfied personally or professionally than I am right now. In the midst of a downturned economy, I thrive, with more raises, promotions, and increases in job responsibilities than I could have ever imagined. I'm doing things I never dreamed of. Writing 5 books, being part of the National Speakers Association, being the official announcer at the U.S. National Toboggan Championship. Why am I telling you? Because it took me years to figure out. I finally got it. I needed to break out of my own painfully shy and introverted shell and look myself in the mirror. I wanted and needed to change. I wanted and needed to transform. I never believed anything was my fault, including my limited promotions, my slow growth, and my inconsistent satisfaction level. I used my defensive reactions as a protective mechanism which impacted my ability to relate to people and communicate effectively. If you don't believe me, let me share with you some quotes from my performance appraisals for my first 20 years on the job.
Tom needs to be more concise in his communication style and ensure he adapts to the audience based on who he's interacting with. He needs to ask more questions for a full understanding. He needs to position his ideas with the audience in mind. He needs to be more confident in his presentations to senior management. He needs to avoid shutting down when others don't agree with him. He needs to stop second-guessing himself and on and on and on. I've read this a couple of times.
My managers just didn't understand. They had to have been copying from my previous reviews from my former manager. It was never my fault and never my problem. Therefore, I didn't do anything about it. I took no actions to improve. I can't imagine. Well, I was never promoted on my own time. Think back to the toughest feedback you ever received and ask yourself, what'd you do? When you're presented with the gift of feedback, you can do one of two things. Ignore it or do something about it. When I first started in collections on the phone, I was an up-and-coming performer in an industry-leading company. In just 2 years, I became a consistent top performer and was given my first management role. In less than a year, I dropped morale like a rock, developed poor management habits, and received devastating focus group feedback. Apparently, being good at your former job does not guarantee you're going to become a good leader. I had every excuse in the world. I managed 35 people on my own in a 7-day-a-week shop with 12-hour shifts. My manager never gave me any feedback. It didn't help that I told anyone and everyone I ran into I should be paid extra for babysitting. For the first of 2 times in my career, I was moved for better opportunities. Code for you've been demoted. But this isn't some hard luck story. I was a hard-working guy with raw talent just looking for a little direction. Apparently, I was waiting for others to show me the map. But today is about lessons in transforming yourself. Transformation is a look back on the milestones that have enlightened you about 1, self-awareness. 2, belief that you can change. 3, actions. Spur you to take the actions to change. Let me repeat that. 1, self-awareness. 2, belief. 3, action. What's number 1? Self-awareness. What's number 1? What's number 2? Belief. What's number 3? What's number 3? What's that spell? I have no idea. It's not intended to be an acronym. SPOT. Milestone 1 hit me like a ton of bricks. After I moved, I realized my former team was happier, performing better, and didn't seem to miss me. Self-awareness permeated my thoughts. Maybe it wasn't. A change was needed. I had been in the Delaware offices for about 4 years, and I really was a bad manager. I was put in a closet about this big to become a computer programmer. I had no technical experience. I was a communication major intentionally to avoid that stuff. I heard there were new offices going into Maine, so I thought I'd talk to the executive, see if he'd give me another shot at managing. I'm not sure I was ready to change, but I felt that I needed to change. The executive said he'd give me another shot, but only if I spoke to my new potential manager. So I did. He knew who I was. First thing he said is, "Tom, do you realize you're cynical, and that's not healthy for a new and emerging business?" I had never been labeled as cynical before. Sarcastic, yes. Cynical, no. I had a growing reputation that was coming to light. I was just smack between the eyes with some feedback I apparently needed. Badly. I left the meeting having to look up to her. I had an idea of what it meant, but wanted a full understanding and context of how it related to me. It means a disbelief in sincerity in human motives. Ow. I'm just a hard-working guy looking for a little success. I just got an inkling. I needed to change my ways if I wanted to taste any of that success. I was more motivated than ever. I wasn't going to let anyone or anything stop me or cause me to fail. I was still fuming over what the first guy said, telling me he didn't see me moving up or growing with the company. Another milestone. Don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough. Prove people wrong. I took that business support role, and I moved to Maine. I was working extremely hard, and I was getting noticed again. I was pseudo-promoted to a made-up position. I was the acting manager of managers. Then, the worst case scenario happened. The manager who loved me moved on, and I got a new one. The new manager and I were constantly butting heads and were never on the same page. I was reverting back to my old habits. He told me I had no people skills or communication skills. I was beginning to believe I'd never get another fair shot. After another one of my Friday 5 p.m. berating beatdowns where I was told I wasn't cutting it, I went home to hear my wife say, "Wait 3 months. One of you will be hired, fired, or moved on." Thank you. It was her way of teaching me patience. 2 months later, I was moved for better opportunities. I was demoted and moved on. My manager was double promoted. It was the happiest day of my life besides my wedding day and the day 2 of my 3 children were born. But she was right. As I was packing up to move, I was flipping through a book I ironically received from this manager for Christmas and landed on page 47. Surrender to the fact that life isn't fair in the book Don't Sweat the Small Stuff by Dr. Richard Carlson. It went on to read, who said that life was going to be fair, that it was even meant to be fair? Another milestone. I needed to stop blaming others and start taking hold of my own career. My new manager simply said, "You have the 45th ranked team in the company. Make them number 1. I trust you. I'm going to give you your space. I believe you can turn this team around." I was beginning to believe in myself. I was starting to take the right action. Instead of running to the wall, looking over my shoulder and hoping that people would follow, I went to the back and provided support and encouragement as needed. I was riding their coattails. In less than 2 months, we were the number 2 team. Another milestone. Proved people right. And I did. I was promoted for real this time, and I was given an office with the door. I could shut the world out. That didn't last very long. I closed the door, and there was a sign that read, "Change is inevitable. Growth is optional." 6 simple words by John C. Maxwell. Change is inevitable. Growth is optional. Another milestone. I was genuinely understanding that my ability to adapt to others and my willingness to grow personally and professionally were creating wins for everyone. I no longer wanted to just survive. I wanted to thrive and bring people along with me. I still wasn't perfect. My people skills were somewhat suffocating, and I was often micromanaged. I think that was my fear of failing. But I was making strides. Working for me was once described as swimming in the oceans of man. Initially, when you jump in, you're shocked and you can barely move. But after a while, you're kind of used to it. You get refreshed and you learn to like it. I had enough people tell me they learned under my leadership. It took some of them years to admit. But I was making a difference, eventually. I once had a manager tell me us being friends is purely a convenience, meaning our relationship isn't important. I was beginning to cherish these relationships. I needed them and they needed me. Besides, my newfound vulnerability of sharing all my mistakes and lessons learned with others was getting somewhat of a following. I continued my roller coaster of self-awareness, belief, and action. Slowly but surely, I was reaching my long-term and professional goals. Not on my time, but I was moving forward until the most impactful milestone of all. While I was on vacation, 700 miles away from home, my wife's aunt walks across the yard and says, "So, I understand your company's been bought." Relaxation turned to tension. There was a flood of stress, worry, and uncertainty. I had no idea what was going to happen to me. I had no idea what was going to happen in the company. I was at an unintended crossroads. I had no desire to leave the company. It was the only company culture I knew and loved. Yes, cynical Tom said love. But far too much time and energy in this place. I came back from vacation and started my new journey. Some people froze in the fear of losing their jobs, while others proactively dusted off their resume. I personally called a relative who worked for the new company. She had been through this just a couple of years before. Her advice? Control what you can't control. She said, besides, with a company this large, there may even be more room for advancement. Sounded counterintuitive at the time, Another couple of milestones. Control what I can control, and I can drive simply by differentiating my attitude. But how can my small voice influence a company this large that was constantly in flux? I started by understanding the mission and culture. I realized this seems basic, but the old company culture was extremely strong. Instead of bringing the best of both worlds together, some people refused to accept the new culture and outwardly spoke against it. I made the effort to embrace the new culture and openly spoke about the opportunities in front of us. I came to the realization the company wouldn't have survived without the acquisition. I, too, was very loyal and knew we had done many great things. But I became an early adapter to the new culture. I had a clean slate. Many people who caused my poor memories were no longer there either by choice or by company direction. What did I have to do? While some people waited for instructions, I jumped in with both feet. Made me think of one of my favorite sayings. Opportunity seldom waits itself. I found a mentor. I became a mentor. I joined Toastmasters, a flood of new milestones. Be willing to take chances, break out of my comfort zone, find a support system, and finally, stop taking myself so seriously. After I joined Toastmasters, it took almost 2 years before I practiced my first speech in front of my wife. I was on my way out the door to a speech competition in Canada where the winner would go on to the World Semifinals and be in the top 81 in the world. It seemed like a good time. I wrote a 7-minute speech about my dog, Kevin, in rescuing animals. I was so nervous I did the speech in 5 minutes. There's a line in there that says millions of dogs and cats. I was so tongue-tied, I said millions of dogs and a cat. My wife couldn't stop laughing. She knew it was a one-time gaffe and knew the effort I put in to get to this point. I knew if I could do it in front of her, I can do it in front of anyone. My family's been there to provide me the feedback I needed to hear and provide me the support to move me forward. My communication skills and confidence level and subsequent success grew exponentially when I involved my family, friends, and colleagues in my learning process. I'm not perfect. It's not the milestone. The fact that I'm okay with it is. I now strive to better myself versus letting everything weigh me down. In the middle of another speech competition, I was the lucky contestant to have a jackhammer going off behind him. I was thrown. Years before, I would have screamed back. Instead, I went home and I changed my practice routines to encourage the strategy. I now practice my speeches while the children are playing the piano, the trombone, or the xylophone. I invite the dog into the room so I can step over him while he's howling. It helps with focus and concentration. I'm even a little less bashful. I practice my speech in front of my dental hygienist while in the waiting room. All are actions to improve. It has made me more open, more bold, more confident. The opportunities in front of me are endless. My ability to adapt has made me a little bit more go with the flow, and a little less likely to think about the negative things that can happen. I've taken the lead in my life and career. I've taken actions to improve my attitude and destiny. Professionally, I've made more of a name for myself in the last 6 years than I had in my previous 18 combined. Personally, I'm just happy. Probably just a little easier to be around. My transformation has been slow and will constantly be in a state of evolution. I'm on top of the world. How's your 2020 hindsight? Can you grab hold of your own milestones? You have the luxury to look back so you can look forward. Are you aware of your shortcomings? Do you believe that you can grow? Do you have a supporting cast to help you identify your blind spots and reinforce the obvious ones? I began to believe that I can make a difference. I proved people wrong. I proved people right. I stopped hoping. Because hope wasn't going to get the job done. I started taking actions for myself, and for others. Change is inevitable. Growth is optional. Moving from resistance to acceptance isn't easy, but it is possible. You have a choice. Do nothing or do something about it. Be vulnerable enough that people see the real you. They'll be willing to help, but more importantly, you can transform into who you really want to be. Hold yourself accountable as if you're the only person in the room. That's when you know you've made the difference. There's no such thing as wrong place at the wrong time. There's only self-awareness or self-doubt, resistance or acceptance, but it is your choice. Your catalyst for change may be right in front of you. Transform into who you really want to be. Thank you. What do you think?
Great hand gestures.
Okay. You like the hand gestures?
You had really good transitions.
Okay.
Whether it was with your movement or with your voice.
Okay.
Vocal variety was very interesting.
Okay.
Good job keeping engaged in speech.
And Logan, there's a ton of vocal variety, wasn't there?
Oh yeah.
A ton, which is fabulous.
Okay. Yeah, and so what were the three key words again? Yes.
Self-awareness.
What are the initials?
Ah.
SBA.
Self-awareness. Right.
Uh-huh.
Belief.
Uh-huh.
And
What's the A?
Action.
Okay. So I didn't intend to have an acronym, or did I? You remember what it was, don't you? And there was repetition there, and that's probably 6 minutes into the speech. A wake-up call for you? It was. You know, you get the audience, they're kind of getting droned in, you're kind of getting your comfort level of who I am as a speaker, and then all of a sudden I make you answer. Whoa, what just happened? I intentionally engaged the audience there to say, oh man, are they going to call on me again throughout the presentation? And it's really just, it's not to wake you up, more of, you know, pay attention and there's some things that are in here for you. Now, I shared a lot of stories about me. But was this a me speech or a you speech?
I felt like it was a new speech.
Okay.
I think that, like, take your experiences as examples and kind of apply them, find areas in our own lives that are similar.
Okay.
I feel like it was a youth speech because the scenarios you were talking about, like some of mine have been through, and I was like, oh yeah, that's happening, yeah. So like, I don't know, I felt I could connect to you just because I've been doing the same stuff, and probably other people maybe in that future have been through the same thing.
So I'm 47 years old talking to you guys who are 18, 19, maybe 20. Was there a connection?
A little bit.
A little bit.
In certain areas.
I have thick skin. I won't.
You talked about how as you progressed, how it took you from that, like, all this time you've been learning. And so, like, it almost sounded like you're talking about when you were younger, how you thought this and thought you didn't take responsibility, you shared it. So, like you're saying, like, I can see how you can relate to others because you said you're young one. Not necessarily that everyone that sounds like that.
When you get to be my age, you start to. But there are relatable points there, whether you are professional or not, whether there are different ages or not. And believe it or not, I actually have a 7-minute speech that follows this. Because I was on top of the world on June 6, 2013, I lost my 23-year job. And so I come back to this moment of truth that is staring me in the face, but now I have a different attitude, in this transformative attitude of being self-aware, taking action, and I knew that I'd succeed. So I start talking about this road I have to start taking during that time. So I have a speech about moments of truth and how I had to recover from that, and they still all apply. But if you think of it in terms of a movie, you get to a part, you start to build up, and then all of a sudden something happens to the character, and then you have to build it back up for the crescendo at the end. So that's the intention there. You're not going to get to experience You won't see my funeral, that's what it's called. But there is, so what are some of the things that needed to be improved in? What are some of the things that you kind of question what was going on?
You started really far back on stage.
Okay.
I mean, it all, like, obviously when you develop your transitions and everything, it all made it make sense a little more, but when you started, it was like, wow, he's really far back there.
Okay, why do you think I did that?
So you can come at it.
Okay.
I mean, that is center stage, I mean, for us, we usually have a curtain pose,
Mm-hmm.
but that is center of the stage nine, usually stage. You know, I thought it was okay.
First class did the same thing. I did a different presentation, but I start in the back. And there's a reason why I do, whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. But I start here for a couple of reasons. One, it forces me to talk to you with a voice that you can hear. So I can't really start like this. Because I need to make sure that I'm vocalizing to you. So it instantly puts me mentally into the right vocal parts where I am. It allows me the chance to start coming to you. So now I'm starting to engage you throughout the presentation. And also, you're going to pay attention more in the beginning. So I can give you that space a little bit more. You're going to pay attention to me because you're going to say, well, this is a little unusual. But what's interesting about stage presence is when you see most presentations on a stage, people are doing this. Did you see at any point, did you feel like I was wandering back and forth?
I felt like you, like, started on the side, and then going to that. It was like a,
I have a pattern, and there's a couple reasons for that. I'll get back to the pattern in a second. But I was standing in a speech contest, very first speech contest I was ever in 2008. And this is my stance. And it did not change for 7 minutes. So, I don't know how, but I ended up going to the next level. And they said, Tom, you should really move around a little bit more. I said, okay, works for me. How are you guys liking my speech now? And then the next person said, well, your wandering was a little distracting. And your message gets lost in the distraction. But there's a comfortable middle way around. And that is by walking and talking, I'm okay with it. But when I got to a message, where did I say, I'm not perfect? Do you remember where I was?
Where's your center stage in the back there?
So you're going to walk away with probably 10% retention in a week from now. But you might remember where I was on stage when I said, I'm not perfect. And you're going to remember the messages of it's okay not to be perfect. And so what's going to happen is these are anchoring stories, and you're going to remember where I was on a stage. You're going to remember maybe a hand gesture or a gesture, or maybe some words that I used based off of where I was. So as long as you're not wandering aimlessly on the stage, that's okay. But back to your point on pattern. And I don't know if a lot of other speakers do this, but I've chosen certain patterns that I walk in. I use the depth of the stage because a lot of speakers don't. It's the most underutilized parts of the stage, so you're going to pay attention because it's a little bit different to begin with than the things that I've already talked about. But there's a reason when it comes to the use of gestures and where I am on stage. Were there any parts in the presentation where I stumbled or forgot where I was?
you did, we didn't know this one.
Okay, you caught two.
You went over, I don't know what you said, but you said it, and then you stopped, you reflect yourself, and then you said it again.
That was one of them, yeah. There were at least 4 places I couldn't remember what I was talking about. But where I was on stage reminded me exactly where I was. So when you practice, you start to figure out. So when I come here, I know there are certain messages about not being perfect, about opportunities seldom label themselves. And so I could actually give the speech backwards if I wanted in my head, because it's going to help you to remember key messages. It's going to help you to where you are. So after you write your speeches and you start to use the stage, start to anchor your messages and remember where they are. It'll actually help you remember where you are in certain stages. And then you start to integrate the hand gestures, and the hand gestures start to help of what your next thing is going to say, because that now there's a fluidity to what you're talking about, and it helps you to remember your speeches, or at least it helps me, the gestures and where I am on stage. So there have been plenty of times where I've forgotten what I was talking about, but I can get myself back into gear based off of where I was. And a lot of times when we make mistakes a bunch of years ago, if I forgot where I was in a speech, I probably would have just panicked and stopped. Probably would have gone and checked my notes. Because to me, those are the most important words ever. The audience has never heard them before. The audience doesn't know you missed a line. The audience doesn't know that you just messed up unless you prove to them that you want them to know that you messed up. Sure, we're all going to mess up. All right, strive for perfection, but accept excellence. Those are things you want to work through, and those are the things you want to pay attention to as you're working through a speech, is get over the fact that you've made a mistake. Good. What other thoughts? Yeah.
Maybe it was a little fast in the beginning.
Okay.
But in the beginning, I had a hard time following what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, I had that same, Tom, one specific spot where you had the better, stronger, and what was the third one?
Braver.
Braver, right. They seemed to come pretty quickly. There was a little pause, but yeah, a longer pause in that series certainly would have helped me. Right.
Okay. That's great feedback. Huh.
You know, one thing I thought worked really well, Tom, is you hold your gestures. Like when you did the I'm not perfect, you got your hands out there for about 7-8 seconds.
Yeah.
There were a number, when you're talking about the opportunity right in front of you, you hold your gesture, which is so nice. It's so nice to hold the gesture.
Yeah, when I talk about gestures, I mean, a lot of them, even if they're natural gestures, you want to try to hold them when you can. I like to call them alligator arms. You know, when you have this anxiety or fear of public speaking, what happens? So when I said millions of dogs and a cat, where was my one? Was it up here? It was intentionally held in as the I just made a mistake gesture. Did you pick that up on that? Okay. Well, there's a method to the madness on some of the gestures that are out there. But when we get into these alligator arms, what happens is you start bringing the attention to the gestures. The gestures should not be the speech. The gestures should support the words that you're using. Or non-words that you're using, if you are. But what happens is a lot of times we come in, we're so apprehensive, we're nervous up on stage. And there's a reason why I think I was a little fast in the beginning. I don't know if it was nerves or not. I've actually learned what I used to think was fear of public speaking is actually anxiety to get the message out. And what I found is when I'm standing still like this, giving a speech, I have this adrenaline that's trying to break out of me. That's another one of the reasons why I walk. It gives me the chance to stay loose. It gives me a chance to whatever nervous energy is in me can come out naturally. And I use those to break out into the gestures, and it lets me loose whatever tension is in there. So go big. If you're going to go, you might as well go big, because if you do this, you're only going to leave people hanging, and they're going to say, now, and when it's halfway, people know. You want to go all out. Now, it doesn't mean everything has to be this, but it just means that go ahead and take your gestures to another level, and they're probably a little too conservative to begin with. Good, what else? So what are the things that you've been talking about in class? What are the things that you've been asked to work on? Okay.
Eye contact?
Okay. So how was the eye contact?
We have to do like the 7-second or 5-second awkward eye contact thing. They like look around and they like walk in someone.
And I noticed you doing that. I saw you lock eyes with him for a few seconds, and it reminded me of what we were doing in class.
I like it better than
Well, I saw you do it with multiple. But no, I saw you do it.
everyone but you. Well, it's interesting because did I give Dog some eye contact? Did I give him a little love? Okay. Yeah, and Dog got some.
Oh, actually, do know.
If there are people that are sitting in the back row in the back corner, they need to feel as if you're giving them eye contact. And a lot of times we spend so much time only on the front row. Even with Dog kind of hanging out there, he deserves a glance. And that eye contact is very important because I've had an issue in the past of, because of nerves or because of adrenaline, I've actually looked over people's heads. And so I'm never looking at it. And so if I'm doing this, does it look like there's eye contact at the first row? And now, so you're no longer engaged in my speech. And I've had a history of doing that early on, and people have said, I didn't really see them. And so what I've actually done is I've looked every single person in the eye. And it's not necessarily in a pattern, but if I notice it's been a while since I've talked to you, I might stand here until you look up a little bit and get some eye contact, and I'll just keep talking like this until you look up, and then I'll move over. And so it just keeps the audience engaged a little bit and keeps me engaged of where I am in the speech. It allows me to make sure that I can get some reactions. And there are certain people in the audience that might chuckle a little bit more for you or might have a little smile for you, and they're the ones that you want to keep as your eye contact because they're your fan. And it might only be singular, but take that fan. There's always going to be someone who might feel sorry for you and say, I'll just clap for you anyway, you're no good, but it doesn't matter, they're your fake fan. That's where you want to stay with them. And take that person and feed off of their energy that they have and make sure that you're cluing in to what they're doing. So there were a couple points in there where my wife says I'm not funny, so it's okay if you say I'm not either. But there are some points that are supposed to be funny in here. And did you guys get some chuckles?
Yeah, I like the 2 out of 3 first.
Yeah.
That was pretty funny.
Okay. And I mean that.
Another one bites the dust is cute.
Another one. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So you guys were laughing.
What?
And there wasn't this I'm on the floor laughing type stuff. But as a speaker, and I used to get offended by it, except my wife continually reminded me that I'm not funny. But I was like, oh man, I only got some chuckles. Or maybe I only got a couple smiles. People weren't out loud roaring laughing. And I was like, oh man, I guess it didn't come across well. Well, what I learned over time is that your reaction doesn't have to be on the outside. You might be chuckling inside, or you might not be comfortable. As an audience that's this big where you're crammed all into the front row for the most part, the chances of laughing actually go down significantly because you're in the front row. If we were spread across, we'd actually be a little, laughter is going to be less too. But if you were scrunched together right here in the middle, you'll probably have a little bit more laughter. And laughter is contagious, and the more people that are scrunched together in a collective group versus linear, you're going to actually have more laughter. So where people are sitting is going to impact that. So I knew whether I was funny or not, the laughter is probably not going to be out loud. But if I can get a smile or get a chuckle, then I'm winning. And I seem to get a couple of those. So I'm like, well, in my head, I'm winning, whether it's actual or not. I'll take whatever perception I can get. Did I give you as a speaker permission to laugh?
I would definitely say, especially with bites the dust, like,
Okay.
I assumed that was definitely there for like a week or something.
Well, and telling the topless joke too. Well, it was definitely a punchline.
You looked up for a minute and like smiled, and I think that was his permission.
And there was a little bit of a look up and a little bit of a pause, even just for a second or two, and I smiled. And I gave you guys permission to laugh. And you'll get that a lot in very serious parts of the conversation. I'm talking about healthcare, and it's not as serious here, but maybe you're talking about something, and then you just want that comic relief to give someone permission to laugh. You have to be able to give them a cue. And as the speaker, you are the cue. And so if I just muscled through that and just kept walking and didn't give you permission to laugh, you guys might have said, gee, maybe he's a motivational speaker and he doesn't like people to laugh at his stuff. Laugh wherever you want. But that's because I gave you permission to. And if I don't give you that permission and give you the little smile or give you a pause or give you an indication to do it, you're actually going to take away from the impact you can have on your speaking. Did you have a point?
Well, no, just like when I did act on stage and we had like comic relief, we would always have this pause and when we started talking again,
Never had that problem. But when there is a lot of laughter, you do actually have to wait as a speaker. And so how many words per minute do you guys speak? Have you ever thought about that? Guess.
60.
You're probably closer to 170.
What? Who knows? Like me personally? Hi.
All right, so what I want you to do is take a speech that you've written when you go home and just read it. Read it as if you're presenting it. So it's not, I'm just reading, blah, blah, blah. But go ahead and figure out how many words per minute you do. It will actually help you because your speeches on Monday or whenever they are 4 minutes long. But if you speak, I speak 125 words per minute on average, and it's going to change based off of how dramatic it is, if there's going to be additional laughter, those types of things come into effect. But on average, I'm about 125 words per minute. So that means I'm speaking for 4 minutes means I can only speak 500 words. So when I write a speech and it's 700, I know I'm over. And so I now need to cut out 200 words on there. And it's very helpful in your length of the speech. It's very helpful in being clear and concise. And it's very helpful into making sure that your words are economical and make sure that they're impactful. Because I would write and write and write and write until I couldn't write anymore. And then I would go back and realize it's just too long. But now you can start saying, well, this isn't as important. And now you're keeping to the points that are very important just for the audience. And that's how you turn it from this I speech of, here's what I wrote to, into a you speech of, this is really about them. And when you know how much you speak per minute, it's helpful in laying out the speech. Good. What other comments? All right, Doug, I think we're back to you, kid.
Wonderful. Tom, thank you so much. That was great.